about Cameron Ward and his visit to the Florida State Seminoles.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back in, everyone, to another edition of Locked On Seminoles. Thanks to the everydayers to make this a great show, and I'm really looking forward to this live stream because it's a big day. Florida State will be hosting quarterback Cameron Ward, the former Washington State and Incarnate Word quarterback, is arguably the most coveted prospect in this year's transfer portal. So we will dive into that quite a bit. I want to get your questions. I want you to ask about anything that you want to know regarding to him in terms of either A, his recruitment, what's going on with why he's so coveted, comparisons to other players, whatever it might be. I'm more than happy to do that. And to be quite honest with you, it's going to be a lot of fun talking about it. We'll get into his stats and everything like that first. But first off, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets if you just put $5 down on a money line bet, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a Knicks game, maybe it's the Atlanta Hawks, whatever. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. All right. So first off, this past season at Washington State, 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, just over 3,700 yards passing. Believe it or not, Washington State has some pretty good receivers. It's not a team that's just devoid of talent. It has some players. But would he have had more if he was at Florida State? Of course. That's the reason this is so exciting, because Florida State just had a great run-pass quarterback. They have others waiting in the wings, but if they were to sign Ward for the 24 season, and he does just have 1 year of eligibility, full disclosure, you're going to see a quarterback that would have an opportunity to raise up the play of other guys around him and make special plays. So I have a couple of stats pulled up on Pro Football Focus. Going to talk a little bit about them, then I'll jump into the chat. Again, questions, fire away. I'll get to those in a second. If you get one up, trust me, I'll get to it in just a moment. I do want to do a little bit of a backlog on what he did with deeper throws. If you've watched this podcast at all, you know that I like to talk about throws down the field, 20 yards and beyond. Ward's pretty darn good at it. Last year is just over 25%. This year, over 40%, 20 yards and down the field. So 23 completions out of 57 attempts, 40.4%, 725 yards, 12.7 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. That's a really important one too. That's 5-1 touchdowns to interception ratio. Anytime you're in that stat, you're good. Down the field like that, that's really rare. So great job by him. BTT, it's something that you'll probably hear me mention quite often with Pro Football Focus. This is their opinion on what they would like to call big time throws. So that you can make a big time throw on a screen if there's a whole bunch of guys around you, but generally it's 10 or more yards and usually 20 or more yards down the field. He had 17 of those this past year. Out of the throws that he made down the field, 26.2% of them were big time throws. That's really, really impressive. So when he made these types of throws, the passer rating by NFL standards was 112.8. That's outstanding. Ironically, it's higher than any other category. And let me just back away from the Pro Football Focus for a second and explain to you why this matters. When you look at the teams that are winning big in college football, doesn't matter which level, I guarantee you FCS, FBS, Group of 5, Power 5, however you want to define it. If you go through 10 teams that are ranked in the top 20, pick whichever ones you want in any division, and then you go all on into the statistics, you look at the teams that are winning, they have a quarterback that is getting the football to play make. Maybe a lot of screens that do it. They might just execute, and that's fine. But generally speaking, they can throw the football down the field, even if they are a running team. Here's a good example. We're going to talk about Georgia quite a bit here in about a week or so after signing day, because Florida State plays them. Georgia has a really good passing game, but a lot of it is predicated on play action. Believe it or not, their offense really isn't all that different based on what they did this year to Florida State. They just don't run the quarterback quite as much. Here's the deal. Accuracy down the field, man. If you do not hit accurate passes down the field when you go against an elite defense, good luck. You're not going to have 12-play drives against elite defenses over and over and over. You have to hit chunk yardage plays. This is not a new scientific revelation. I'm well aware. But that's why Ward is important to Florida State or whatever school he ends up signing with. We'll get into the recruitment part of this here in just a moment. Let me break down some comments here. What we got first? Mike, what's going on, man? How you doing, sir? Jody Beard, I think you will be a good quarterback for this team. Do you think he will be a good fit? I mean, I don't know if there's a better fit based on history than what Ward has done compared to Norvell. Here's the one caveat. Ward is very mobile, but he doesn't run for yardage very often. He runs to avoid pressure, and then occasionally he'll run short yardage, goal line, or something like that. But he only had like 100 yards rushing or something to that effect. It was minuscule, but he's a very good athlete. More importantly, and why he fits is he will escape and he'll make an awkward throw that, quite honestly, is bad to show a younger quarterback that's just learning the position, like the very infancy stages, because he can do things that most people can't. All but underhanded. I got a photo of him throwing around a guy, and he's like, it's below 50%. Like if this is 50, he's down here. You know, he's at like 40% and still able to release the football. Those kinds of throws have nothing to do with coaching. I don't care if you've played baseball, hockey, highlight. It could be anything. When the ball is in the air, you have to get it there in some way, shape, or form. Kicking it, catching it, throwing it, whatever it is, there's their trajectory, the way the ball gets there. Some guys just have a natural ability to make the ball curve the way they want in a baseball game, etc. This guy can throw from different angles and put different lofts on the football to give his guy a chance to catch it. It's very, very unique. With Norvell's system, the ability to move outside the pocket, which they normally do, and they did a lot with Jordan Travis, I think the offense for the Noles would be a natural fit. Do I think he'd run a little more before anybody asks? Absolutely. I just don't think that with one more year before he goes to the NFL, I don't think it would be Jordan Travis, say 21 or 22. It would be more Jordan Travis this last year where they ran him in spots. And then he also had the opportunity, if he wanted to take off because there's an all-out blitz and he sees a hole, well, sure, you take off. Overall, Ward's ability to make the defense have to wait before they get him to the ground also opens up things down the field. That's the biggest thing here. That's why he's a fit. And that's why this is a great question. So, Jody, thank you for that. All right. If he's so good, why is he entering the draft? To be honest, I think there's 2 points. I talked to somebody else about this. Rhino says it's a great question. Playing at Washington State out on the left coast, up in the Northwest, he's had some film, but he hasn't had as much as some other guys. And I also think that it's a deep draft for quarterbacks this year. It kind of goes in cycles. If he'd have been in last year's, if the group had changed, I think he might have left. But this is kind of unfinished business, and it's my opinion. I don't know this. He'll have to comment on it at some point himself. But Cameron Ward, I think, wants to play on a bigger stage. And with the bigger stage, he would also have the ability to escalate his draft stock. So, for instance, Florida State just played in the ACC title game. They're going to play Georgia, etc. When you put those kind of games on film, and assuming you play well, obviously, NFL scouts are going to evaluate it a little bit differently, or at least, in my opinion, they should. More pressure, more lights, more cameras, more questions, more hype means you are under a microscope. You don't get that same thing at Incarnate Word. No offense to them. It's a program where he originated from in San Antonio before he transferred for 2 years up at Washington State. That is very important. If I'm a scout, the one question I would have right off the bat, hey, man, you did it at Incarnate Word. That's cool. And you were smart to go Power 5. That's cool too. But it's still Washington State. It's not Oklahoma. It's not Ohio State. It's not Florida State. It's not Georgia. There's a different pressure there. So I think that's why. I could be wrong, but that's my definitive answer there. Angelo Smith. Hit the like button, folks. Thank you very much. Please do that. I'd appreciate it. I'm trying to share this podcast with as many people as possible. And the easiest way to do that is for y'all to help out. Hit the like button, smash that subscription, make sure you share it. And if you have questions, as always, when we do these, fire away. This is fun. Every time I post it, I break the podcast up into 2 sections. If it goes like an hour or whatever, I want many, many people to enjoy this because it's fun. This is truly fun. Thank you once again, Angelo. I appreciate it, bud. All right. So is Ward in? What do you mean? Like, is he committed? No. Is he supposed to be at Florida State today? Yes. I won't know any details, just like anybody else, till after. And just full disclosure on how these work in general, Ward included. It's not like with recruiting. I can get kids' numbers and all this kind of stuff from the high school ranks, and you follow them through, etc. At the end of their commit, you might be able to get a hold of them, although unlikely. And that's it. With the portal kids, unless you had a long-standing relationship with them years and years ago, you're not going to get a hold of somebody. So everything's kind of secondhand information. And unless they make a statement, social media, whatever, that's it. It makes it wild. It's fun, but you're going to get disinformation. You're going to get improper notes, etc. It is very, very wild. All right. Is Julian Fleming still available? The last I heard, this is bizarre. He was one of the receivers at Ohio State. Fleming is in the portal. And a lot of people thought he was going to go to Nebraska because Kyle McCord visited. McCord's, for whatever reason, allegedly, again, I don't have any insight to this, is allegedly not going to go to Nebraska. Does that make Fleming not an option there too? Because if I remember correctly, he was going to visit there. Big-bodied guy that ESPN had #1 in the country coming out of high school. Hard to say what's going to happen with him. I have no idea where he's looking to go. I haven't followed it. But, yeah, there's some potential there. That's a great question. Here's the deal. I'll give the roundabout here. I'll just make this easy. Jody Beard asks, when will there be news? When will he commit? Well, here's what I know. He visited Miami earlier this week. Ohio State was rumored to be a school involved with him, but I haven't heard anything about them the last few days. He's going to visit Florida State. He may even be on campus as we do this. And also, he's probably looking at somebody else, I would assume. Again, specifics, I don't know, because this is fluid. He's got SEC schools, ACC schools, Big 12, whatever he wants to do, he has an option. The one thing he said after the Miami visit is he would take a week to 2 weeks, quite possibly. It's up in the air, even by his statement. Therefore, who knows? I'm sure that no matter if it's Florida State or Miami, because I'm assuming they figure it's going to be one of the two, they would want him to commit immediately, so it helps your signing day for the high school kids. But there's no guarantee of that. Timing is everything. Concerned about the fumbles. I don't know. Did he fumble much? I mean, I honestly don't pay much attention to that. And that's something that's pretty easy to correct with ball security and drills and practice. If Ward did, that's something they got to fix, but he's a game changer player. So I think you kind of live with it. Mr. Rob Castagna, I recently saw that Ward has been sacked a lot. I know that his O-line, but do you think maybe he holds the ball too long? A little of both. Watching him play live, watching the film, he is I'm going to find a way to make a big play guy. You got to be careful about coaching that out of a player. When you get on a kid about, okay, you need to get rid of the football, there's reason for it, and that can cause fumbles. But at the same time, some guys just have a knack for it and then throw the ball down the field or creating something or even taking off. He's able to do any of those. So I'm not sure what the best answer is, and I don't know what Norvell and his staff would want to do with that. You'd have to get with the receiver coaches, everybody on the same page, what's best here, because there is more risk. Also, he's a guy, I think, as you know, he's played 4 years of college ball. He's going into his 5th year wherever he goes. Cam Ward, kind of have to give him some leeway, don't you? As long as he's not just carrying the football all willy-nilly. If he's tucking it away and keeping it close to his body, like do a little bit better, I would think you would give him the ability to make some of those decisions that you may not with a younger quarterback. James Reeves. I'm very worried about linebacker even before Monday, and I will talk. I've got some names written down here towards the end of the podcast. I'm going to just generically, we'll go over more of it, may even do it tomorrow, the overall list, because it's finally started to blossom a little bit. Some of the guys going out. Not sure exactly how I'll do the podcast, but We'll talk about it. James says, I'm worried about linebacker. Can we improve over that? We have, I don't know. I guess Nicholson is our best on roster guy. Florida State's in trouble, in my opinion, at linebacker right now because the depth isn't there. They've gotten some guys in, but they're losing some key guys, etc. Losing one day's not good. I think they need at least 2 transfer portal or linebackers now. They don't both have to be starters, but you need experience. Let me define experience. That doesn't mean you've been in college for 3 years. That means you've been a starter somewhere, or at least a co-starter somewhere. Even if you're not a dude, it could be a guy from University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. I think that's where T.O. went, actually. But you need somebody that just knows what it's like to go out on game day, be on the field, go through drills, lead his group, and then be out there on 1st and 10, first play of the game for the defense. You need a couple guys like that just in practice and stuff every day. Florida State had that this year. Part of the reason they were successful on defense is the linebackers were experienced. That's important. So I'm a little concerned about it too. We'll see. 14 fumbles. I don't know if that's over his career or whatever. That is a lot. But again, things like ball security in the pocket really isn't that difficult to fix. Not from what I know. And part of it, again, is probably him holding on the ball. I'm not disagreeing. But at the same time, I trust Florida State staff based on what they've done on offense to fix that. Michael Pride, rushing numbers deceiving because of his offensive line was not great. Here's a great point. Mike is right. For those of you that do not know, this is one of my pet peeves, and I hate this stat. The NFL has it right. College does not. In the NFL, if quarterback is sacked, that number is taken away from the passing yards. In the college level, even though it's a passing play, if the quarterback is sacked, it's taking away from the rushing stats. Why? He was sacked quite a bit, so his rushing numbers do not behoove what really transpired. It's dumb. I think if he wanted to take it on and they'd have to set it up in Norvell's scheme, Ward would be very good as somebody that would run RPO, occasional, quarterback counter, quarterback buck sweep where they pull the guards and like everybody sucks down and they fake it. It's kind of a naked bootleg kind of action. Something like that once a game, he's good for 10 yards. You had 2 or 3 of those plays in a game, especially against a quality opponent that has similar talent, it can tip the scales in your favor on the always important scoreboard. So, yeah, I think that it's really important to keep into a factor here. Florida State's going to be rebuilding their O-line a little bit, et cetera, and we'll talk some about that again with the transfer portal tomorrow, the days after. But this is huge. He's gotten his butt kicked from sticking in there at Washington State. They don't have the same talent as some of the upper echelon Power 5 teams do, so he lost more yardage. Be careful reading into his stats. That's a really good point by Michael Pride. Patrick Wilson, that Ward kid isn't nearly cerebral enough to run the North. Why? What would make you say that, Patrick? We could not disagree more. Torrey Sims, I haven't heard, is Benson playing the bowl game? I don't know, but my guess is if he does, it would be shocking based on everybody else. I just assumed he'd already opted out. I haven't even checked. If somebody wants to pop that in the chat or if they're to have, so be it. But I honestly do not know. Running back is the spot above any other. The guys opt out because they take the most hits and they just want as few as possible before they go to the draft. All right. Mr. Broccoli, do you think Lundy is just a money play like Peyton? Can NIL keep him from leaving? This is a topic I was going to wait for later to kind of interject my rant, if you will, but I'm going to go ahead and do it now. If kids are leaving for NIL, it's a really bad idea. You have to earn it if you haven't already gotten some money. Like if they've given you something, go with it. Guys that haven't played at all. This drives me nuts. Some of the guys aren't playing that much and demand that getting paid. In the case of Peyton, he's a starter. I kind of get that. That's at least a negotiation. Lundy wasn't a starter, but he was a good player. He was very effective. I need to know the numbers. But overall, here's my rant. Guys that bitch and moan about the NIL that they are getting, you better have already put it on film, meaning statistics, etc. That drives me crazy. And I'm not somebody that really jumps in and it goes all out to get on guys. I mean, everybody should try to get their money for, sacrificing their body and playing for the university they play for. but it drives me nuts. So it's not necessarily the biggest positive in the world. With that being said, there is another positive that I want to talk about here in just a second. We have to get into why Ward is such a good player in the system and why getting it means something, because the other school that he might go to is one that most Florida State fans would probably not like very much. And that's just part of the deal, man. You gotta beat your competition to get the main thing that you want, and that's W's. Speaking of W's, Prize Picks. If you haven't checked it out, you should. What is Prize Picks? It's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. We're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less on 2 to 6 players on over-under, say like 80 yards receiving, 80 yards rushing. Those are the main points. There's also a combination league, like since basketball is going on, you could pick an NBA player to hit a stat in combination with an NFL player. It also has injury insurance, so if your guy gets hurt in the first half, you get it reloaded. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. All right. So here's the biggest thing that you should look at beyond the obvious. You know, obviously you want him on your team. You obviously want him on your team. He's a really good football player. But at the same time, you also have to remember that if you don't get him, there's a really good chance he's going to go to Miami. And this is something that doesn't happen a ton. But at the same time, if he goes to Miami, and I don't know what would happen with Florida State's quarterback situation, potentially DJ Uiagalelei, I don't know how that's going to work out. If I remember correctly, I've got it written down on my notes somewhere, he's going to visit Florida State in the back half of this weekend. They're two different quarterbacks, just both from the Pacific Northwest, as far as where they played at in the Pac-12. That would be very interesting. So if anybody wants to put in something about the Miami-Florida State thing, I'd like to address that in general. I'm going to go through some of the other questions here as we get going. Let's see, where was I? All right, this is the last one. Any intel on this? Cam has already made his decision going to Miami. Miami sports writer claims he was there, blah, blah, blah. I've heard a number that he was offered. I'm going to leave that alone because I don't know how accurate it is. It's pretty interesting, but I think there's a lot to be said for him taking the visit there, and then right after going to Florida State, he's just trying to compare. I don't think he would have immediately turned around and went to Florida State if he was done. That wouldn't make any sense unless he already had it booked and he just wanted to honor it, possibly. But I doubt that he's done. Why would you take the visit? That's a lot of work. Just be done. You can just call him and say, hey, man, I made my decision. I don't believe that's the case, but I could certainly be there. All right, let's see. If you look at a lot of his film, when you don't have a lot of talent around you, you tend to try to do too much to compensate. That is true. Michael Pride makes a great point there. Turnovers happen, more talent, less turnovers. There's truth in that statement. The only time that it doesn't happen is if you have too much confidence and you just throw it up to your guys all the time, and you're going against good DBs, you're going to get some picks. But I don't think that there's any doubt. Washington State's defense wasn't great. The O-line wasn't great. They had a hard time sustaining drives. So Cam Ward would throw the football into tighter windows than maybe he should have. And sometimes he would just try to make too much happen in the pocket, giving his players more time to get open, tight ends, running backs, and receivers. So yes, that can absolutely lead to more turnovers. Seminole Siegel 83, DJ sucks. Obviously, you are not a DJ Uiagalelei fan. Since you brought him up, I do want to read off a few of his stats. It's very interesting. I mentioned at the top that there's something to be said for having DJ in the lineup. Really good player, really talented. But at the same time, we're talking about a guy that's, quite frankly, better than people think at throwing the ball down the field. He's got a big arm, and these numbers kind of back it up. I mentioned the 20-yard passes a little bit ago for Cam Ward. Here are the same kind of deal for him at 20 yards plus for DJ Uiagalelei. 18.2% of his passes were 20 or more yards down the field. He was 25 of 57, a higher percentage than Ward, 43.9, 784 yards, 13.8 yards per attempt. Part of that is Jonathan Smith is a fantastic coach. He's the guy that just went to Michigan State. But you flat out got to tip your cap to DJ. Throwing the ball down the field is hard. It's pretty good stat. He also was 8-3. That's not quite what Ward's was, but it's still pretty good. Touchdown to interception. He had 19 big-time throws. Ward had 17, if I remember correctly. 29.7% big-time throw percentage rate on 20-yard passes or more. So he's pretty darn good in those situations. 108.4 NFL rating in that circumstance. The throws that he did best were still under 10 yards at 114.5. He struggled with the mediums 10 to 19. It was only 88.7. That means a lot of guys trying to throw the middle field where it's hard. So it just interesting on DJ. I'm not a huge fan either, but it's something to think about. K-Jack, what's up going on, man? If we don't get Jeremiah, do you think they go the portal route? I feel like they should regardless. I think at least one portal receiver is a safe bet for most teams every year now. I think that's kind of going to be the barometer. You could take two or more. It depends on who the second guy would be. Even if you get Jeremiah, and again, I don't know who it would be. If there's a fit, there's a connection, somebody on the staff at Florida State already knows one of the guys. It's another school, or because they recruited him. He's a fit because he runs similar routes to something Florida State either has done or wants to do, perhaps both. There's a reason to take at least one portal quarterback. There's a reason to take one running back. There's a reason to take a receiver. I think it's two, though, because they're losing two NFL guys. Like all the skill spots on offense, you always got to think about taking one, even if it's a backup, because experience in the passing game is so much a part of being consistent. Receiver, what a year. Quarterback, even if it's a backup, I would always consider it. You just want experience in that quarterback room. So all of those. But to your point, though, man, if you want to take more than one, you're losing Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. That is hard. You lose them both. Just my opinion. All right. I hate Tofili left. Well, to be honest with you, I didn't even know that until that. I hadn't checked Twitter that much more. I've tried to stay off of it. I'm curious. I'll have to read more into that. If he did, you know what? It is what it is. I know Rodney Hill's in the portal, etc. But again, I want to save most of that for tomorrow's show, and we'll get more into it. All right. Michael Pride. Miami people seem to think Ward will have some more talent around him if he comes to them and are concerned about Florida State's visit. I mean, it depends on what you mean by more talent. That Miami fans and Florida State fans can see things 100% different. They're never going to agree. So I'm not going to get much into that. But at the same time, Florida State's losing a ton. Which guys come back for Miami, too? Like, they lost Colby Young to the portal. Colby Young to the portal a couple of days ago. Well, what if one of the other guys left? It's too early. I won't say anything really about the comparisons of any school, Florida State, Miami, until after the NFL draft deadline. It's usually around January 15th. If somebody knows the date, please post it in the chat. I don't know what it is, but they're like Jacoby George might turn pro. He had more yards than Keon Coleman did this year. What if he's not back? I don't know what's going to happen. Guys change their mind. So I'm not going to get too worried about that just yet. Okay, Tofili hasn't left. That's good. I saw Rodney Hill had left, so I'm glad to hear that. There we go. Yeah. Again, I'll get into the Hill stuff tomorrow. What little I've heard, I'm gonna wait on that, but that sounds pretty awkward to me. Jeremiah Smith plus Julian Fleming equals success. Let's go. Battles end. Angelo, I mean, it would be hard to argue with that. I have no idea which teams, before anybody else asks, in case they haven't already, where Julian Fleming's going. I got one Ohio State contact that runs the podcast on Locked On, but I mean, he's left Ohio State. I doubt he's really concerned about where he's going. I don't know, but I'll guarantee you this. His phone is busy. 6+ feet, 200+ pounds, 4 years at Ohio State, former ESPN #1 player out of high school. He will have options. I would imagine Florida State's at least reached out. That would be my guess, but I do not know. Kerry Kimbler. Is it true that Rodemaker is out for the bowl game? I have not heard that, but I have not tried to read anything intentionally. about depth charts for Georgia or Florida State, although some come up on my timeline a little bit, until I get to about Christmas. I have so much going on with recruiting in the portal that I put the game on the back burner. Honest, open-ended assessment of what I'm doing, there it is. There's too much as it is right now for me to cover. The bowl game's not till well after December 25th. So right around Christmas, I'll probably start really diving into that. And then 26th through the game, we'll get into it. If he's out, that means that concussion was worse than they had anticipated. Concussions are flaky. I don't know if he's out, but man, that would suck. That was a really awful hit he took in the Florida game. Michael Pride, I think a priority other than quarterback should be to add a couple of linebackers. Agree. Could defensive ends, maybe a couple offensive line guys. I'm not so sure we may take more than 7 or 8 transfers. I think Florida State will take 10 or more. I don't think there's any doubt about it, and here's why. Quarterback will be one. They may need a running back now since Hill's in the portal. That's debatable. Depends on you get at least one receiver. I think 2 is a possibility. And then they need at least a couple guys up front on the offensive line. You're already at 5+ just on offense, and their linebacker room needs at least 2. You're going to need at least 2 D linemen. I mean, you're like 8-9 already. We haven't talked about DB, and you're always looking for corners. That's the number one spot because nobody wants to play it out of high school anymore. Everybody wants to ball. So with that being stated, I think it's a pretty unique situation. Florida State may not go that way. They may choose to go a little younger because they got a lot of talent at every spot other than linebacker. Linebacker is the one I'm convinced. 2 linebackers. Now that Lundy's in the portal, I am 100% convinced. But I expect, based on Norvell's history at Florida State, they'll still hit the portal hard. I'm guessing 10 to 12. Let's see. Patrick Wilson, no truth to LT leaving. Hill is out, though. That is correct. I hope we get Cam. However, the consensus seems that we will end up with DJ. Do you think we can compete for a national title with DJU? I do not. I don't think he's good enough. Here's the bottom line, and I'll give you the exact number just to be completely on the numbers here. Just looking at his throws, like his completion percentage going down through, he struggles too much in the middle of the field, and really good teams will try to take the outside away because they have the corners to do it, and he gets in trouble in the middle of the field. He threw like 57% or what have you for the year. I don't think – let me get his just basic passing numbers for you just to give a baseline for DJ. His passing numbers this year, I mean, you could take it however you want, but here are his last 3 completion percentages in the order of the games. They played Stanford, Washington, and Oregon to conclude the year. Stanford, terrible defense, 63.2%. Washington, pretty good defense, 48.4%. That's not good. Oregon, definitely a good defense, 54.3%. He's not good enough to win a national title. Prove me wrong. That's just what I think. So, if we want to be real about Florida State winning national titles, you don't have to have the number 1 quarterback in the country. You didn't need Jordan Travis, Jaden Daniels, somebody like that. Those are great quarterbacks, but you can win one without it. However, I think one of the most important things to look at in general, guys under 60% completion percentage, in my opinion, I don't see how you're winning titles because they're just missing too many throws. Keep in mind, Jonathan Smith was the quarterback coach / head coach, whatever you want to call it for them. I'm sure they had another guy that was labeled quarterback. Smith played quarterback at Oregon State back in the day. Now he's obviously at Michigan State. He is a very well-respected quarterback guy. And DJ was still 57%. That should give everybody here pause. I'm curious, like everybody else, what the fascination is with him. I think he's good. I think you can go 8-4 to 10-2 with independent, and there's a million parts to be going and coming on the roster via recruiting in the portal yet. So we got to see. But I just don't think you can win more than 10 games with him. I just think he makes too many errors. It's not accurate enough. And against the elite teams, that's going to cost you. Just my opinion. K-Jack the Great. Why aren't we going after that DN from UTSA? I don't know. They may have, and he may not have had interest. There's a lot of possibilities there. Marvin Jones Jr. is now in the portal. And if you've got any sense of Florida State history or old enough, Pops was arguably as good a linebacker as college football's ever seen. He was from Miami Northwestern, played at Florida State in the early 1990s, and holy crap, was he good. That's his son. He originally signed with Georgia over Florida State, but he is in the portal. I would think about him before anything else, and except for the quarterback position, which, as you know, most probably know, that's the most important spot. Beyond that, you could make an argument Marvin's the most important guy to get. It hasn't happened at Florida State, or excuse me, at Georgia for him. Maybe he resurrects his college career in Tallahassee. Just saying. Just saying. All right. Speaking of resurrections, there's still guys on the Florida State roster that had to wait a bunch for these seniors, this really good senior class. We're going to see some guys we didn't talk about much this year, in my opinion, not just be good next year, but be really good because they've had to wait their turn. Like Tofili showed flashes, but if he's the main guy next year, maybe he runs for 1,000 yards. We don't know. Rodney Hill not being there, they have some other guys coming up, maybe Keziah or somebody else. There's going to be some transfer of talent in terms of name, but the talent really isn't different. They just had to wait their turn. So that's something that everybody needs to think about because it's not as easy as what some people believe to just walk in and play. You got to learn the playbook, got to have the system, got to fit. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, and that's part of it, man. That's part of it. Speaking of fit, FanDuel. Right now, you should be locked in with FanDuel because we got basketball season, we've got hockey, we've got football. It's baseball winter meetings. You can start talking about futures with that as well. But anyway, check this out. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. They have a lot of different opportunities on the app, and it's very easy to use. Wide range of betting options include point spreads, obviously, player props. So if you have something like number of touchdowns or something special, maybe in a quarter, what have you, that's another opportunity. Over-unders for the number of yards for a player or a team, maybe on how many points they score, and you can do other things as well. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, let's get back into the questions. All right. Michael Pride, he states, I think DJ may get us 10 wins. I think Ward could be a legitimate Heisman candidate with us. We're pretty much lockstep there, Mr. Michael Pride. I think DJ's a good quarterback. I just don't think he's elite. I think in the right system, Norvell being a really good one, Cameron Ward could be a tremendous football player and one that throws maybe even fewer yards because he'd come out of some games because Florida State would beat the bejesus out of teams with him at quarterback. But if they got like Jeremiah Smith, maybe they got, somebody else from the portal that helps on offense, a great tight end, maybe a great left tackle, whatever it is, helps the offense get rolling again. He could throw for 3,400 yards, but be like 31 touchdowns and only 3 picks. 10 plus touchdowns to interception ratio get you in the Heisman race in a hurry. Kerry Kimborg, got to look at DJ ability to run, not just his throwing game, to be fair. Yeah, he could run a little bit, and he's a truck. He's a truck. Matter of fact, where we at with DJ? This is fun. I mean, he's a little better run. I mean, I'll give you credit for bringing that up. Let me find where he's at. This year for DJ, he didn't run a ton. The only time he ran up to 8 times was against Colorado. But he had 6 rushing touchdowns. That's not bad. 4.2 average. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this is such a dumb rule. In college football, they have this idiotic rule where if you get sacked, it comes off the rushing total. So he averaged 4.2 yards a carry. He had 275 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's pretty good. You can run RPO with DJ. You can. Lee Fields, do you think players who want to negotiate their NIL will ever do so privately, or will they use the portal negotiation tactic? That's a great question. We could do a whole show on this, a week. Let me give a little backstory. This is Lee Fields' question of the day. Basically, if you don't give me the NIL, I'm going to the portal. Here's the deal. That's two-way street. It's two-way street. Once a player officially enters the portal, if the school wants, they can pull his grant and aid, meaning his scholarship. So that's one part. Part two is also very important. To get to that point, what happened? Every situation is different. Everyone. There's no great way to do this, but if you're going to go through and you're going to hit the home run with your off-season roster, if you will, I don't know how else to call it because we're in different seasons, you have to get some of these guys not to hit the portal. Part of it's NIL, but part of it's just relationship. I talk about that in recruiting. It's the same with your team. Norvell or any head coach must sit down with his staff. Who do we want to keep more than anybody else in case NIL comes up? I would wager pretty heavily that conversation takes place a lot. It has to, right? Because if you're recruiting Jeremiah Smith and all these guys, that's great. You still need the guys on the roster to be there when those players get to your campus. It's not one or the other. It's both. That's how you win big. You have more players than the other team. It's not a rocket science adventure. So, in not having holes at a specific spot that are glaring also helps you not be in a situation where a team can avoid other spots. Like on defense, if you got a really big hole at D tackle, just anybody, well, if you got a great D end, we can run away from this guy. We know we can handle the D tackles with one-on-one blocks. We're good. You can't have glaring holes that also alleviate the talents of other guys. So, like if DJ Lundy or Patrick Payton or whatever it is, I don't even know Lundy's situation. If it's NIL related, it is what it is. You need to address those earlier, hopefully, than later. And I'll get into the second or the third part of this, which is I'm curious what everybody else has heard on this too. This is the big elephant in the room, but you have to be on top of this as the year goes on so you're not caught off guard. That's what you got to do. I don't know how you do it. This is a new deal. Like, however much Lundy was getting, did you think he had a problem with it? If not, why didn't you know? Was it out of the blue? Does he have people around him that aren't good people? I have no idea. I don't know DJ Lundy if he walked up to me right now. But that's just one example that I'm using. And linebacker is a major concern, maybe the number one concern for the 2024 Florida State football team. And then that's a problem. Here's the third thing. I'm just going to throw it out there. There have been a lot of rumors that the battle's end is not where it needs to be in total fund. Not number of people, but they don't have that big money booster, that big daddy booster that will throw down millions in a really big pinch for whatever. Coaching, I don't know how it all works, but coaching salaries, maybe the school takes care of that and then he helps with an NIL player or whatever. I don't know how it all works. But just bottom line, big money, seven-figure kind of cash guy. I could be wrong, but I've heard that from multiple people around the program. One that covers Florida State very closely, was in Tallahassee. Other people away from the program, some people that recruit against Florida State. This is not a news flash, but I've never heard any details. And it's not like Florida State wants to promote it. Maybe this, with some of these guys like Patrick Payton, bitching and moaning, etc., is because the money they thought they were going to get is not available. We all have to consider that. I don't know the answer, and that's unfortunate. But if that's the case, you're going to lose players. There's no way around it. That's something everybody has to think about. All right. Oofers, do you think Hill and DJ actually leaving, or it's a bigger NIL seeking, same with Peyton? There's a couple ways to look at it. I don't like to speculate on any one player, let alone a group, but sometimes it's just I want to try something different, and that's cool. I think it's pretty obvious with Patrick Payton, NIL is at least part of it. I haven't heard anything on DJ. We'll see, but I'm assuming there's something there. Like defensive guys are going to hang out with defensive guys. How much of it, though? Like, for instance, let's say Lundy was just interested in playing at Florida State when he signed, but for whatever reason, somebody in his family's moved away, he wants to be close security, he wants to be there. I don't know. But to think that NIL isn't at least a part of it is asinine. It's asinine. You have to be able to do that. You have to. So think about that. Make sure that you're realistic, if you will, because if you were in their shoes, and this is just my opinion, but just think this through. if you were in the shoes of a young man that was like DJ Lundy at one point, I think he was number 1 or number 2 in the nation per Pro Football Focus on like tackling percentage or something, like a really important stat. He's a good player, but he wasn't starting. He probably felt like he should have gotten more of the compensation, I would guess. So if he asked for it, especially to come back, because he would have been a starter, obviously, do you pay him or not? That's a negotiation, because it's like you're giving him upfront money in a sense because he wasn't a starter. But at the same time, he's been pretty darn good when he did come into the game. So I guess it's just dependent on what you want to do. I'm not saying there's any one way to make it happen, but I think DJ Lundy is kind of an exception because there aren't many guys like him that are that effective as backups on defense in college football. They usually have already left. You could make the argument Florida State was fortunate to have him for the 23 season, let alone the 24 season. So keep that in mind as well. I don't think that there's any doubt that he's a great football player for what time he was on the field, and he just feels like he should have been compensated. That's hard for me to really speculate on much more than that. But to say that he's, again, like anybody else, if they left, there's a really good chance that LinkedIn was a part of the reason why, and that's what it is. Speaking of the reason why, let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. With the holiday coming up, if you haven't done so already, you can still use it. LinkedIn, their app is super easy to navigate. They have over 1 billion people, literally, in some capacity that connect through LinkedIn. At some point, you're going to find connections, whether it's for retail, whether it's for accounting, etc. You have a way to do it, and they will set up questions for you that get the screening done and help you narrow the path and make it more effective for you to run your business. So keep that in mind. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let me get back in here to the comments. If I miss one of these, I apologize. Sometimes I get behind. Let's see. Michael Pride. I just think Ward can do more with much more barrel talent than DJ can do. Add another running back that can catch screens. The sky is the limit with Ward. Toffoli's really good at that, by the way. Just a random shout out. I thought Toffoli was as good a pass catching running back as college football had this year. And it's ironic, he didn't even start. Benson was the starter. So, excuse me. Anytime you can get guys like that in the spread, man, it's hard. Linebackers aren't going to cover running backs in space very often. Not when they can't just beat up on them. Once they get past 5 yards down the line, wheel routes, over route, angle route, and then they got to find them in all that traffic in a screen game like Michael's talking about. That is hard. Any news on Jeremiah Smith? The only thing is I know Mario Cristobal went in home with him, and all the coaches are going to do that. I don't know if Ryan Days went in home yet. I assume that's today. Or he already did. But we're going to find out on signing day. I've talked to more people about that young man, who I respect very much, than about any recruit in my lifetime. His recruitment has been wild. I do not have any news. We'll find out on signing day. I've kind of given up on getting an angle, if you will. Michael Pride. Everybody thinks that players are getting money up front on these NIL deals. That's not happening. Players get money monthly. There may be some under the table stuff, but it's not what you think. There's a lot of truth in that. These are contracts, right? So, for instance, what Michael's talking about, let's say, we'll just use easy numbers here and make it divisible. A player gets $10,000 as a signing bonus, and it's $100,000 overall. So they got $90,000, and they're only going to play 1 year. They're a fifth-year senior. So 12 months, $90,000. You divide it up. That's just over $7,000 a month. That's it. Yeah, you could do a little bit more. You might say in the first 6 months, instead of that 7,000 plus, I get a higher percentage. I get 55. I mean, you can negotiate it. It's a contract, but they're going to want the kid on campus before they start toting out money. There's a certain school, I won't name it, but it's in Gainesville. Hint, they got smoked already on a kid that they gave money to, and he's decommitted. I'm going to leave it at that. They already gave him money. Way to go. So dumb. Let's not forget that there's a second half of portal kids that'll be available after spring practice. Angelo is correct. This is the fun part, and it's something I'll bring up on Angelo when we get there. The transfer portal giveth and it taketh, okay? You don't know who else is going in the portal. There might be a kid that is slated to be the number one middle linebacker at fill in the blank, but they hire a new linebacker coach, and they are like oil and water. It's portal after spring ball. Late March, all of a sudden you see, oh, wow. Somebody that we recruited didn't get him, but now he's available again. What about that? We should get on the phone. And just for people to understand, sometimes people literally get phone calls less than 5 minutes after their name isn't, and I'm not exaggerating. I've got firsthand knowledge of this. Less than 5 minutes. It can flip. Angelo brings up a phenomenal point. Phenomenal. If you want the best players, you got to think about it from a totality standpoint. We don't have to fix the roster right now. You have to get all the way through spring ball and a second portal season. I think it's May or whatever, April. They may change the dates. It is the NCAA, the league of everything changes every 5 minutes. Don't get me started on that crap. But the NCAA is very inconsistent. Very inconsistent. I don't think you have to worry about anything other than to say this is going to be a very, very important portal session now, but it's not done. Angelo is right. If Florida State doesn't get everything they need, and maybe somebody leaves Florida State too, you adjust with the spring portal as well. Just something to think about. Good question. Kerry Kimbler, no offense to Battles End, but I think when they made a big announcement about the $500,000 matching donation, didn't help their cause in both how much is available and how much may not be. Just my humble opinion. Mr. Kimbler couldn't be more correct. I mean, why do you show your hand at the table? If you've got 5 cards in your hand, you're going to show it to the person playing against you at the poker table? I mean, I could be wrong. But at the same time, I guess you also want to try to hint that you have money. I get the other side, but I'm a more cautious person. I don't know what they have, but the timing of that is also important. Obviously, Patrick Payton, that's something we've all talked about. That's awkward. I have no idea what he was getting this past year, and I have no idea what he wants this next year. If it ends up working out, great. But here's the other side of that. If they upped the ante, and I have no idea, it's for him to stay, that's still less money that you have for other people, and he's probably going to talk. I've mentioned this on other live streams, and I'm going to mention probably about everyone for the rest of the time when we have an NIL discussion. Be careful what you give, especially early on, because then it sets a precedent for other people. All these guys are going to talk in the locker room. Well, why did so-and-so get that? Why don't I get that? Just something to think about. I don't know if you can really do anything about that. It's hard. I mean, it's really hard. Somebody's going to leave pretty much every year over this. That's just my opinion. But you have so much money. And even if they had the money that Phil Knight did to donate into Oregon's fund, which I'm sure is just a slush fund of an ungodly amount, there's got to be some resolve with it too. There's got to be some humility. And you don't want to set, again, a precedent that you're going to get X if you come to this institution. Think about Cam Ward. Get back to him for a second. You know, this was supposed to be a Cam Ward discussion, but we've certainly got into the NIL. The number that I heard Miami's offering him is humongous. I'll leave it at that. Humongous. Would Florida State even be competitive with it? For example, to the point that Kimbler is making, let's say you come within $300,000 of a number, whatever, and you have a better visit than Miami. And again, I have no idea. He's just starting his visit today, so we certainly don't have any info there. But would he be willing to take less to come to Florida State because he just had a better visit, felt more comfortable? Hypothetically speaking. You at least need to be competitive, though. I won't name the player or the school, but I know a kid that flat out didn't want to go to a school, but the NIL money that he was offered out of high school was too great. He flipped his commitment to a school that wasn't that close in his recruit, but he just thought it was too much. He had to take it. I get it. You have to at least be competitive. And of course, that is subjective. What do you think Cam Ward's subjective term of competitive is? Because I'm sure whatever it is Miami offered, he's going to discuss with FSU. The number, I'm not going to get into the number I heard. I'm going to leave that alone. It's confidential. But if they're not close to it, he ain't going to Florida State. If the Battle's End has a problem with how much money they can give Cam Ward for 1 year, and negotiation points about how much a month, how much up front, all that aside. I'm just talking in totality. If Florida State has a problem giving him that money, he is not going to attend Florida State and be a Nole. And there's a really good chance that when Florida State goes to Miami Gardens next year and plays in Hard Rock Stadium, Cameron Ward is a Miami Hurricane. Come hell, come high water, if all these rumors are true about the Battle's End, they're in trouble. You're not going to get the Cam Wards of the world. But that brings up the obvious question. If you don't have the money, why would you even bring him in? So that's why I've been a little bit hesitant to believe some of these rumors. The two things don't jive. They don't. Not even close. I think it's actually kind of goofy. Why in the world would a school that is struggling with NIL with the Battle's End, that's the name of the NIL organization, why would they bring in what is widely considered to be the number one transfer portal quarterback if they don't have money for NIL? That makes no sense. Sue me if I'm wrong, but that's just my opinion. All right, Stephen Bland. DJ Uyunglele is a 5-star recruit. Bust, we don't need that. I mean, I think bust is a little strong, but he might be better than what you have. I mean, I'm going to get into, if Cam doesn't end up coming like that's announced and they end up with DJ, I'm going to go with why I would have taken him over the other guys on the roster right now. I'm going to tell you I would, and go in depth on it. People can throw things at the screen or whatever. I don't think anybody currently on the roster is ready to take on the challenge next year. That's my opinion. But I need, again, as I've noted, I'm going to keep mentioning, until after January 15th, when all the NFL stuff is done, all the portal is done, I'm going to wait till then to kind of get into that. You need to know at least the beginning of what you're going to have for spring ball before you talk about it. I think totality is very important. Patrick Wilson, Malik Murphy to OSU, done. Oh, wow. If that is true, that's an interesting point. I think, to be honest with you, Murphy fits Ohio State. He fits Ohio State. That's a big-bodied kid that can run around a little bit, but he's got a hose. He has a big, big arm. Good for Ohio State if that's the case. All right. Ben, what position are we looking weak at for next season that needs upgrading? Will our defense be okay? It's ironic that, Ben, you mentioned that. Linebacker, and if you don't get it fixed, no, the defense will not be okay. They lost both the inside linebackers and Lundy. They're like 98% of their production. That's a hole, brother. That is a very, very serious concern, and Florida State fans should be concerned about it. I guarantee you, Norvell and the entire staff, not just defense, the entire staff are not real happy about the linebacker situation. I know they have some linebacker recruits, and I'm not going to get into that today. Especially in the middle of the field, the guy that makes the call, do you want it to be a first-time starter? With all the junk that teams run at you with motion, etc. Like Louisville, for instance, Florida State beat the bejesus out of them, right? They had experienced inside linebackers to go against all the motions, the shifts, and the different things that Louisville did. That helps a lot. Not having that, having one guy out of position against the fast Louisville team, 6 points. They need to fix the linebackers position. That is a humongous concern. NIL needs to be capped or they ain't seen nothing yet. That's from Stephen Bland. I don't think you can cap it, and you would get sued until the cows came home if you tried. That's my opinion. Colin Cressy. Not one person is talking about Daquan Finn, whose tape looks the best of any portal quarterbacks and looks similar to a Vince Young. Finn's not as tall as Vince, and I don't know about being that dynamic, but Finn's underrated. And for those of you who don't know, he played at Toledo. He's a dude. I believe he's a Detroit kid. I want to say he played at Martin Luther King or one of those programs right through there. I think it was King. So he's been on the stage since he was in high school. That's a big-time program. That's a really interesting situation. I like the Finn kid as well. That's from Patrick Wilson. Yeah, if you've seen Finn's film, I mean, just for entertainment, go check it out on YouTube or whatever. He can ball. Team 2 Sterling. It's all about the NIL money. Look, I don't know if it's all, but it's pretty darn important. Jonas Burris. Finn would fit nicely. How about Howard? You know what's interesting? I haven't heard anything on Howard. Well, Howard's a kid who's at Kansas State. He actually visited Miami, and then the next day, if I got my dates right, is when Cam Ward visited Miami. They brought in both. I think they're as good a two as there is in the portal, just my opinion. But there are other guys too. Some people will mention Finn would be up there very, very high for me. Some like Uyunglele, I don't like him as much. Riley Leonard that went to Notre Dame, a lot of people really like him. I like him, but not as much as some other people. But I think you could make an argument Howard's the second best. I don't know if Florida State's making a push for him, but that's a great question. I haven't heard his name with Florida State. Michael Pride. There is so much support staff that constantly stay locked in on portal potential transfers. Knowing what the needs are for the team allows a quick phone call if a particular player pops in. That is true, and that's why these phone calls happen. That's Michael, you're correct. Now the question is, do you have the right information once the phone call is made? That's subjective, but you need to make an impact. It's like when you're trying to go out with somebody, when you ask them out on a date, you get one shot to do that the first time. The same thing. Hey, what about coming to visit our school? You need to get to that point in the conversation. Do you have the goods to make that happen? That is the second point to that, but your original thought is 100% spot on. Colin, Finn has 1,200 yards rushing and 16 scores in the last 2 years. That's pretty darn good. Higher yards per attempt and just as accurate. He looks better for Mike's zone read offense than any of the highway prize guys and can sling it. The only thing I will say about that, and I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but he played at Toledo. He's not getting hit by as many big guys. That's the only thing. Like when I explain to somebody what it's like to see SEC defensive linemen, Power 5 defensive linemen in general, like you meet one of the kids at Ohio State or Florida State or something, you go up and you shake their hand. I don't have the biggest hands in the world, but like my hand is sometimes completely covered. I can't even see it. When those kind of guys run into you over and over, it takes its toll. And when those kind of guys run like they do, think about trying to get away from Jared Verse. Boy, that's fun. No, it's not. Ask the Florida quarterback who got the crap beat out of him before he hit the portal. Oh, I got away from Verse. There's Patrick Payton. That sucked too. Finn didn't face that. That's the one question I have, and it's always the hard conundrum to get over. How well will he translate to a higher level of competition? But there's no doubt that dude can ball. He's an athlete, and he can throw. Colin, I'm not certain Cam Ward or DJU are the right fit. Howard isn't right because his mechanics are known to be sloppy, and he needs serious fixes. USC is offered. I've heard USC with him. I don't know if Howard will end up at USC. That would be an interesting fit with Riley. Like Norvell, Riley, his scheme wants a mobile guy. That would be interesting if Howard went there. Daniel Edwards. Portal has ruined college ball. There's going to be a major turnover after every season for the teams. Just the way it is now, DJ throws too many picks. Again, if you watched any part of this podcast, you know that my opinion is pretty strong. I don't think DJ is the guy, but he may end up being the one for Florida State because that's what they can get. But the portal is here to stay, brother. It's going to make it a lot more difficult for every school. It's not one, it's all of them. Jonas Burris, I think it benefits the team to sprinkle around that NIL. Go get Finn, Howard, splurge on linebackers, and find the next verse. Let me make a statement since you brought verse, and it's a great point. He played at frickin' Albany. But the story isn't even there that's important. That's up in New York. He's from Dayton, Ohio, which is maybe 40 minutes to Columbus. He didn't get a sniff from any of those teams in the MAC or the Buckeyes. Sometimes things just go sideways. For whatever reason, he was a late bloomer. Finding a guy like that once in 5 years is going to be fortunate. Probably closer to 10. You got to hit more home runs out of high school rankings. And sometimes, again, a guy like Verse happens. But that is about as rare as it gets. Position of need in the backyard of an elite program that you compete against and ends up at Albany. And then you get him all the way down south. That is one of the wildest recruitments of all time. As far as your point about getting the linebackers, that's 100% true. They got to find somebody in the portal that's a dude. At linebacker, there's no question. Angelo, anything on defensive end and D tackle from A&M? Here's what I've heard. There are Fadil, how to say his name, Fadil Diggs, however you pronounce his name, and LT Overton from Texas A&M are both either visiting this. They're visiting this weekend to Bama. Backstory: LT Overton, face-to-face conversation a couple years ago with him. His parents were once in Tuscaloosa working at the University of Alabama. One or both of them. He's lived there. What are the odds he doesn't go there? Pretty well. He was the number one player for the class of 22 or whatever it was. And, they got him to A&M. I'm sure it was all NIL. But if he's not going to be there and he wants a comfort fit, I mean, he's from the Atlanta area, but he's also lived in Tuscaloosa. Fadil Diggs is a big-time pass rusher, if I remember correctly. He's from New Jersey. That one's random. I think he went to Woodrow Wilson or something like that, and he's from Camden. I don't know what's going on with him, but if they're both visiting, Alabama is really looking for pass rushers. Mr. Pride, I will just say the NIL plan for Cam Ward is out there for sure. I'm sure it is too. I just want to know, and I know I'm not going to get this. I know I'm not. I want a definitive. He's getting X offer from Miami. He's getting X offer from Florida State. And then whatever schools beyond those two, what is he getting? What is Cam Ward getting? And Florida State may not have a number yet because he's starting his visit today. But in conclusion of his visit, I would like to be able to compare them because it's not likely they're going to be exact offers. I mean, there's going to be some discrepancy in some way in terms of how it's given up from. I don't know. I want to know, could Florida State win a battle if they didn't offer as much? Because that gives you an idea of the recruiting prowess of the staff, what the program's worth is after being 13-0, Miami 7-5. If you have money, at least close, and the 7-5 team beats you, that would bother me. That's why I want to know. I don't know if I'll get the number on Florida State and if it'll even get to that point, but that is my objective. Patrick Wilson. If Cam Ward is a hurricane, then maybe the force be with him. Go Noles. Let's see. Why not spend to get a better O-line so that a quarterback can work out? Pocket isn't as big a requirement. There's some truth to that, Mr. Preston Smith. I get it. We haven't had a great O-line since 13, and that O-line was converted D-line guys. Look, here's the problem. Florida State's O-line recruiting for a decade has been, for the level of the program, underachieving. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Jimbo failed. Every coach since has failed in some capacity, including Norvell. They haven't recruited at an elite level. Just pure, flat-out 4- and 5-star guys on the O-line. That's on them. They have some good guys recruited in this class, but they need to get to the point where they're at now is the bottom. They got one guy, the kid from Pine Forest, that's a really good player out of Pensacola. They'll probably play early. But by and large, I don't think they're doing a good enough job to get kids in that are redshirt freshmen that can start. You don't want to start true freshmen, and if it's just a pure dude, whatever. But by and large, FSU has to increase that. The second part, and this is the real problem, O-line is awful in the portal most years. It's a bunch of retreads, guys that haven't made it as starters. O-lineman as a history in college football is the position that stays the longest, makes early decisions, and sticks it out. The best will wait. I don't know why that is, but that's just generally how it goes. Unless we get some serious portal help across the board, it's known our talent will be less than last year's. might be less than the 22 teams. That is from Colin. It's possible. We need to see, again, the totality of it. But there's possibility of that. I mean, this could be a 7-5 to 9-3 team. What quarterback do you get? Do you get the proper needs taken care of up front? O-line, linebacker. A lot to kind of figure out. The GOAT question. If you can't cap it, do you think there will be a collective bargaining agreement? Well, that means they'd have to be unionized and all that. And that's a whole nother kind of deal because it's all individual right now. I don't see how that could work yet. Grand Champion says, I believe we may lose Lil Wayne McCoy for that same reason Miami willing to pay and Florida State being cheap. And this is from the horse's mouth. Well, if that is the case, maybe he does flip. Lil Wayne's a hell of a football player. I've seen him play several times. He is a dude. Florida State would certainly lose out if he decided to pass on the Noles. Jonas Burris, does Jones Jr. make it to Florida State? Or is the hype too high? Injuries have been an issue. I would assume Florida State's the most likely, right? For Marvin Jones Jr., for those of you who don't know, he's the DN at Georgia that is hitting the portal. I don't know. I really don't. They got to figure that out, though. I mean, they need to at least know what the situation is if he's had a bunch of injuries. But Jones has a ton of talent. Colin, who will be our leaders next year? We had JT and Verse. We had Trey. We had Gibbons, Kalen, Jamie, etc. Who do you see stepping up? Well, first, again, we need to know who's still on the roster. Let's be honest. I don't know. Tofili is probably the first one I think of. Defensively, I think he'll work his way into it starting this next year to a certain degree because it's his mentality. Hussey will be one eventually. But next year, there's a lot of guys. Maybe Thomas, the corner, he'll be a junior next year. I could see him. Linebacker is where I'm concerned about it. One of the other guys maybe will be that along the defensive line. Maybe it's Patrick Payton now. I don't know. But that is a huge concern. If you don't have leadership, you will not be a good football team. Amanda Pitts. Does some of the portable players wait to see who we get at quarterback before making a decision? Hell yes. Think about it. If you put yourself in their shoes, man, this is legit. You want to go somewhere they can throw the football and score some points. If you're a defensive guy, as much as anything, makes your job easier. If you're down to a couple of schools and you have options and just, some of the better players in the portal, wouldn't you look at the quarterback spot? Would you be a fool not to? It's the most important position in sports. Amanda Pitts, it's a great question, but flat out, you've got to think about that. If you don't, you're cutting yourself short. Great question, man. Kimbler, is there any chance Florida State takes both Cam and DJ? Zero chance because the kids won't do it. They want to start. They're both going to be one-year players. DJ ain't coming if Cam's coming. Amanda Pitts, do you think these portal transfers and high school players are waiting to see who we get at quarterback before deciding? Already answered that. Waste of money from John. What is a waste of money? Both quarterbacks only eligible for a year. Well, the idea is to get yourself in a position for the year after. In my opinion, talk about Florida State's roster. You're not going to be in a spot to just win it next year necessarily, but two things. Number one, you want to be better. And let's just use Cam Ward with the whole predicate for this. I was talking about Cam Ward, what it means. Here's something to think about. He doesn't go to Florida State. Okay, that's one thing. Unfortunate. What if he goes to Miami and they go 11-1 and make the playoff while you're sitting at home? Let that sink in for a second. What if Florida State doesn't get him? He goes to Miami and they go to the playoff. What if he goes to one of your other rivals? Hypothetically, he went to Auburn or Georgia, one of the other schools that you recruit against constantly, and they get a big bump, all this exposure because they got Cam Ward. You don't know who else he's going to visit. It's hard to say. Getting him is important, but not allowing him to go to one of your rivals is also very important. Okay, let's see. FSU moving to the Big Ten will help our O-line recruiting. Angelo, if that happened, you're true. For whatever reason, the Midwest and the East, where the Big Ten traditionally is, functional, although it's LA to New York now, there's a lot of guys up there. Florida State would do better if they got it. There's no doubt about it. David Scott. I think whoever shows Ward the largest NIL will be the one who lands it. That could be, but I still think fit is part of it. He wants to be a guy that ends up going to the NFL. John, FSU ain't moving. It's such rumor mill, need an invite before we move. Everyone is jumping the gun. It will eventually happen, but eventually, keyword. Yeah, he's talking about conference realignment, and that is true. Patrick Wilson, news is Jones Jr. will be in Tally along with Ward this weekend. If that is the case, then obviously he's serious about Florida State. John, Ward is a stud, but he's only 1 year rental. Don't break the bank on him. I wonder what your consideration is. Here's a question for anybody that's posting. What is your max dollar, no matter what, that you would spend on Ward for 1 year? Just post it in the chat. Go ahead and do that. I'm just curious what anybody thinks. It's something to think about. You could, if you want to post a question to this after it's been uploaded to YouTube and all that, because I'm going to split this up into a couple of different shows, feel free. Will Jones Jr. head to Miami to join his brother, Daryl Porter Jr.? I didn't know they were brothers. Gigi, we need two. Are you talking about linebackers? Because they definitely need two linebackers. If you're talking about quarterback, I'm not sure what you mean by that. DB, Ward keeps the team in the national conversation. If we want respect, we have to win the ACC once again. To be honest, if you added Ward, the ACC is not going to be that good next year. Riley Leonard's gone. If you get Ward, that means he's not at Miami. NC State did get the kid from Coastal Carolina. They could be the second best team. You know, they'll be right there. They got a great defense coaching staff. But, I mean, afterwards, Virginia Tech's kind of a wild card. You don't know. Syracuse, BC, You know, Duke's lost Riley Leonard. Wake Forest isn't going anywhere. Georgia Tech's kind of a wild card. They'd be a team I'd worry about a little bit. But overall, I mean, the ACC is not that good. If you put Ward at Florida State, they should win at least 9 games, in my opinion, even if they have attrition, because he's going to win you a game or two with his talent. Mr. Michael Pride, you have to be able to promote how you are able to develop a player to the next level. Adequate NIL plus knowing that you will get help getting into the next level certainly helps. All right. I mean, he's talking about getting guys to the NFL. Michael's right. But here's the backside. I think I've mentioned this a few times before here on Locked On Seminoles. And again, thank you to everybody that's an everydayer listening to this show. I truly appreciate it. Hit the like button, smash that subscribe. Guys that are projected to be 4th to 7th round picks, this is where NIL, I think, is most helpful. Come back one more year, play with the Noles. You get this, whatever the deal is, X amount from NIL. And then your stock will, instead of be 4th to 7th, it'll be 2nd to 4th or 2nd or 3rd. So it's a win-win. That's what you're probably going to hear. I've heard that with some other schools. I assume the Noles are doing it as well. Gigi, because of Keon Coleman and Verse last year, I believe we will do real well in the portal this year. Well, they do have precedents. Ain't no doubt. That helps. Kids see that, especially Coleman. Yeah, Coleman was on TV constantly. That's going to help your brand, right? I mean, it makes sense. Why would it not? That's important. DB, I want Cam. DJ can't throw accurately. Look, I'm not saying you're right. I'm saying you're 100% right. I could have written that exactly the way DB just put it. DJ Uyunglele is just not accurate enough for me. For those of you who missed earlier in the show, he's around 57%. That's not good enough for me. Ward, not DJ. That's correct. Let's see. Angelo Smith. These veteran quarterbacks are only here to bridge the gap for our younger quarterbacks. There's truth in that. You want to get to the point that Chroma Hawk or somebody else takes over, whichever guy it is, let them work it out. Battle and practice, the old school way. But having one more year to learn and develop in the system is going to help everybody involved. No doubt. DB, GG, facts, give him what he wants, not to go to Miami. Look, it would suck to have your rival get him, and I'm sure that Miami's looking at it the exact same way. That's just the way that works. It's always going to be that way. Don't think otherwise. I'll tell you one thing. If Kim goes to Miami, I got a big feeling Jeremiah flips there. Well, they're going to push, hey, Jeremiah, we're getting him. In Florida State, we do the same thing. Again, it's very important not only to get him, but to get his commitment and it be public like Sunday, Monday. Like by Monday evening for the Miami Hurricanes or the Florida State Seminoles, I guarantee you both staffs are like, look, man, it would really help us if you let us know and do so publicly. because then we can tell Jeremiah. Just something to think about. FSU 2942. Do we know how playing in the game and who leaving for the draft? Not completely. I don't have the list. And I said this earlier. I don't know what the complete list is for the opt-outs. I haven't got to that. I have not broken down the Georgia film. I need to watch some more, see who their opt-outs are. I'm going to do most of that right around Christmas Day. Until then, to be really honest, I'm worried more about the portal, and I'm worried a whole lot about National Signing Day. It's just, it's crazy. So something to think about there. Let's see. $69. With the lack of development in our offensive line, do you have faith in Atkins? Been a long time since an FSU got early in draft. It makes you wonder. I mean, I'm not real thrilled about an O-line situation at Florida State, but part of that's just recruiting. I just don't think they've recruited highly enough guys. Let's see. Michael Pride. Some great players are not looking for the best NIL. NIL helps, but development is more important. Jared Verse didn't come back for NIL. That is true. I'm going to wrap it up on the questions with that. But here's the here's the deal. Thank you very much, Patrick. Great show. If you're interested in Malik Murphy, he's allegedly already committed to Ohio State. Great point. I'm hearing noise around CL3. Is there any truth to him flipping? I don't know. Miami with Cam scares me. Well, it should. Miami offered him a boatload of NIL money. That I do know. But I'm going to wrap it up here. And I want to try to get some of the scoop that I can over the next 48 hours. I'm probably going to do a show on Saturday that's a little bigger than normal, a little broader, just kind of open it up because it's so wide. I'd intended for this show to be really wide on Cam, but it's gotten to the point we just really kind of went into NIL again. And it's partially Cam. But here's the key. Florida State, just like any other school, you've got to hit your home runs. Okay, quarterback, D-tackle, D-end, corner. Still got to have some of that money for everybody on the roster, not just think of portal and recruiting. Got to take care of your own guys first. That's something that came up a little bit today. I want to talk more about that. The next time I do this, and I'll do a live show on Friday, but then again, Saturday as well. I'm going to try to make Saturdays really broad. I'm going to try to get some more information. I'm going to talk about FSU's roster, some of the guys in the portal. What do you think? Do you care? Do you not care? Those kinds of things. Just going to kind of go with that and then get get to it from there. But as I wrap up again, what do you think Florida State needs to do between now and say January 15th? It's right around there for the NFL draft deadline. Portal, recruiting, etc. I want those broad questions to be started on Friday. Then on Saturday, we'll go real broad, just whatever you want, roster in general, state of the program, and kind of go from there. But thank you to everybody who made this show great again today. Had a lot of fun. This is a blast. I know it's a lot of confusing parts, and I'm learning just like everybody else, and that's why doing these shows is important. You get to ask me or give me information, like somebody put in there that Malik Murphy had committed to Ohio State. I didn't know that. Maybe it happened during the show. Whatever the case may be, whatever it might be, let's talk about it on the next live show. We'll do it again probably tomorrow at noon. Don't see any reason not to. But everybody have a great day. Thank you much.